Hello, Anu Lal. Thanks for agreeing to be our guest for the session in Love of Literature. It's not love for literature. You must be wondering what is love of literature. And Danya has explained that every one of us love literature, but not every one of us is loved by literature. So that's the explanation she gave. Thanks for coming to this discussion. We're going to have a very nice, so many topics that we are going to touch upon, and we are excited to have you because your research topic is very unique. Thanks for coming. Over to Danya, please.
Yeah, I would like to introduce Mr. Anu Lal. He's one of India's leading short story writers. He has written 3 books of short stories, 1 novella, and 3 anthologies. His stories, poems, and articles are also published by various national and international journals. We are very happy, Jay and I are very happy to invite you on this podcast in our second session of our LOL. And we think we were waiting for a person like this, for us to kickstart the session with just more than just someone who can write, but who has insights about the, BTS, like the behind the scenes of writing. So this was what was our aim with LOL. I think you are one of the right people for us to have contacted and to have gotten to the thing.
Yeah. The publishing side of the book making. Okay, let's begin with a basic question, Anu Lal. How was it to hold your first book, and what it means to you? Getting the first book published. It must be a few years back. You can share with us. For aspiring writers, it might be something to look forward to. Can you please share with us that moment?
First of all, let me express my gratitude and joy in being part of Love of Literature community, being part of your lovely, wonderful new venture. Being a person who has been connected with literature from a very early age, I feel privileged to be finally, I'd say, be part of something like this, which has not just a local impact, but also an international impact. Because being an online platform, being an online show or podcast, this is going to definitely impact a lot of people, writers and non-writers as well. So coming back to your question, what it felt like holding my first book in hand, it was a unique experience. Not because I was holding the proverbial baby in my hands, but because I was victorious in finally getting a few of my short stories unified and published in the form of a book. It was a long effort. It was a very personal effort. It was, in fact, an adventurous effort. My first book was self-published. It was published through the self-publishing platform called CreateSpace, which was created by Amazon. And I was one of the early exponents of that area in India, actually. But no one really bothered about CreateSpace in India because the books published through CreateSpace were priced in unreachable numbers. You would have to price your book above 1,000 and more rupees, Indian money, Indian currency, if you have to match with their standards, which was next to difficult, next to impossible for an Indian author if he wants to sell his books in India. But still, I was fortunate that I got some readers, not in India actually. Surprisingly, I got my readers from America, from Canada, from England, from places like that, Australia, places like that. So I was fortunate in that sense. And I also got suggestions and new ideas from my readers. They were very responsive to my interactions as well. So it was a good start for me. And even then, there was one problem. Even after publishing my book, getting my book out in printed form, I wasn't able to get a physical copy in my hands because I didn't have a credit card or debit card that could do international transactions. And back then, I had to go to, CreateSpace did not permit Indian debit cards to, transact in them. I did have an SBI debit card, but it didn't work. So my cousin was in the US back then. Even now he's there. So I asked him to send me a copy, purchase a copy and send it to me. His wife was coming back home back then. So he bought a copy, gave it to her. She brought it back via plane. And I waited all those months for her to get back finally and get a copy in my hand. So it was an arduous wait. It was a period of long wait. It was like a culmination of a long wait.
This is a unique story to hold a book, first book, but it was printed in the West. You can't get a copy. You had to wait for it. It's an interesting, I thought it was a simple question, but it has so much behind. Interesting.
Very interesting.
So we understand that the wait should have been agonizing, right? The wait for the book to reach your hand, for your own book to be in your hands, that wait should have been very agonizing.
Yes.
Yeah.
So,
I wanted to ask you something. I wanted to ask you if your background in literature, like you being a literature student and you being a professor in literature, has that played a part in your writing? Or has it been a hindrance? Because you must have read so many books. And for you to not be touched by those ideas or not even by the slightest way be influenced by those ideas, to must have been a little bit tougher.
Anu Lal, you can answer her question.
Thank you so much for this question because it's a very important question.
Yes.
And not many people ask these questions these days. Even the first question that you asked, how did you feel after holding your first book? Everyone presupposes an answer to that question. Everyone says it's like something like that, there is a clear answer for it. But it's not the same in my experience. Even this question also, I'd like to say that my journey was quite the contrary. I became an English teacher. I became a student of English literature because in the first place I started exploring stories and literature and started writing. But I wanted to learn how to do this. And during my student days, I did not know that a course existed which was called creative writing in English. So I thought that I have to study BA English or MA English. I have to do a master's in English in order to get an understanding of how stories worked, how novels worked, how literature worked, how poetry worked. So that is the impetus that drove me towards BA or my graduation and post-graduation in English literature and my being a teacher. Because inevitably you end up doing some professional activity in order to earn a living because books cannot always guarantee you a living. So that is the reason why I'm a teacher now. So it's on the contrary. So in that sense, teaching wasn't a hindrance. It was, in fact, a supportive element. For me, it supplemented my journey as a writer. It provided me a steady income, which most of the authors also would want to understand. You have to have a steady income in order to pursue a career in writing, because career in writing is not for money. It is a career in writing is for the career in writing. You can't trade it for anything else.
Yeah.
Probably you can, but at the end, if you trade it for money or for anything else, you better forget about it because you are not going to, replace it with anything else completely. You always have to have that fear of losing your money or something. even if you are a full-time writer. So you have to have a parallel income. So that is why I'm a teacher. So it supplements my journey as a writer. But sometimes definitely I get bogged down by responsibilities as a teacher, responsibilities as a, even when I was doing that tragic phase of PhD of mine, which I couldn't complete. I was bogged down. Certain times I do feel bogged down. I do feel weighed down by the course that the formal literary studies would take me. But still, I find inspiration sometimes. Somehow, I find inspiration, and all those experiences come back to my writing. So I've written a novel which hasn't published yet. My first novel, which is about a PhD student, a research scholar who has written a book using CreateSpace, which becomes a bestseller. That is the basic storyline of that novel.
Your own
Basically,
story.
your story, is it?
Your story.
The autobiography. Exactly. Yeah, it was part of it.
Talking of creativity, you as a teacher, I want to ask you something. What's your take on creativity instilled? Can it be instilled, or should it be there and you can only nurture it? What do you believe in? You must have seen many people, many students under you who are naturally creative. In my opinion, creativity should be there within, which can be nurtured, but it cannot be thrust on someone who's not creative. This is my opinion. You can talk about it because you know more students. Can you tell us about that?
I think I too believe in the same idea that creativity is like an inborn sort of thing. I mean, it's like a bone in your body. You have to be born with it. Like you have to have that bug. But again, you can personally. I feel that there are moments in my life when I feel. I don't know if other authors also feel this way. People say writer's block and all that. So there are moments of writer's block when I feel that techniques help me, techniques, which means you have some habitual things that you can do, some tested and proven methods that you can adopt in order to bring yourself to write something extraordinary from an ordinary event, in order to let you find a story from a regular event. There are some patterns and set things that may not be creative to you personally, but may appear very creative to a reader and another person. So creativity, I think, is not much about the subject, not much about the individual, how he perceives it. It is also about the individual, but it is not entirely about the writer alone or the artist alone. It is also how the spectator views it. For example, a point in space, a dot in space might not be very creative for an artist, but for a spectator, all of a sudden that simple dot in blank space might make a lot of sense, might make a lot of meaning. Depends on what perspective the spectator is taking. So in my point of view, creativity cannot be taught, it has to be inborn. But at the same time, we can equip the students to handle situations like this in life when they need to be a little bit creative in order to have a smooth, way with things, or in order to have a better situation in life. Sometimes you have to be a little creative in order to come out of a difficult situation or to tackle an emotional event. It's not just for writing or to create a piece of art. It is also to tackle life that we need creativity.
Definitely. Yeah. We would like to know how you transitioned, like you have written short stories, you've written a novella, you've written an anthology, and you're now writing a novel. Was this like transitional? Did you go from short stories and slowly you built it up and it became a novella, and then now you have got an idea which could be stretched into a novel? Or was it just very organic? Did you just go with the small idea, whichever idea came to your mind, you just ran with it?
Exactly. I went from short narratives, from short stories to novels. It was a long process. It took a lot of time for me because I started writing, I think, when I was in the 5th standard, short stories. And then short stories were too long for me back then. I couldn't focus on them. I found some issues with my stories which I couldn't fix. I didn't know what I lacked. That was my earliest memory of myself being a writer. I lacked something I knew, but I didn't know what. So I started writing poetry. And I felt good about myself when I wrote poetry. And I continued writing poetry until probably I started doing my post-graduation. And during my post-graduation days, I realized that this is where I can reach in my literary studies. I could flip through all these major theories or the methodologies, everything, the canons, everything I've covered. So now it's the time to move on to short stories. That is when I confidently moved on to short stories. And gradually, short stories became longer. Novella was an organic process, but novel was a conscious process. I wanted to write a novel. And I have to mention Orhan Pamuk's Naive and Sentimental Novelist, a book that I read on train when I was doing my handicap PhD. When one day I was coming back home from my university, I read this book on train, which is titled Naive and Sentimental Novelist. That book literally gave me the confidence to move on with my novel. I had an early idea. I had written a few chapters, but I didn't know where to go. So reading that book gave me the confidence. So gradually I stepped into writing novels. And this novel is already completed. The present title that I gave it was something that I don't want to discuss right now, or with the publisher.
Respect.
You shouldn't also.
You don't have to. So, I think I came across in your website that you conduct workshops, creative writing workshops. So, have you come across any promising potential, and how do you spot your potential aspiring? I mean, need not be an aspiring writer, but you can feel this. She has got the potential. And in such a scenario, what do you do to really tap out the best out of the person?
I've conducted workshops on creative writing, and I have seen students of varying capabilities, especially when you focus on creative writing alone. But sad to say, or should I say ironic, I remember this one student of mine who wasn't from any literary background, was doing a technical course, a degree course in electronics engineering. And this student of mine, that I cannot even imagine anyone having in the present literary scenario. But the student is married off. She's leading a family life right now. She has completely left literature, even reading books, I believe. I suggested a few books to her during that period when I knew her. So this is one of the ironies, one of the tragic ironies of the way we treat our students. Many have potential. Many are brilliant writers. And when I read some of the new Indian writers in English, I feel at a loss for words of how much talent we lost during this, process of education. Because education itself, in most cases, kills off the person's talent. That's one of the examples that I would like to cite for the student of mine. I don't want to mention her name because it could be a problem. It is such a tragic loss, I believe. And what I usually do is when I locate a person who can do writing, who can create something with words, I try to show them opportunities, give them some context, some exercise, something out of which, they'll create something, they'll write. Sometimes they just go for the normal thing, the normal expression of something. I give them, for example, a context, a situation. and they write about something, about that situation or person, something. And in some cases, I find some creative aspect in that writing. And then I suggest them books to read. Because reading, I believe, was the first educative step that you can take towards nurturing the creative writing capabilities of an individual. You have to be a good reader in order to be a writer, you know. So what I do is when I spot somebody, when I find someone, I try to give them exercises on writing, and I try to suggest some books which are related to their style of writing. That is what I do. And by reading those books, they come up with new ideas. You know, that is how I do it. And I also suggest them social media sites, which can help them contribute to literature in a direct and indirect way, and also help them understand the process of writing, read other authors. There are social media platforms these days, wonderful apps that showcases writings,
Yes.
irrespective of your background, irrespective of your education, irrespective of language. Sites such as Pratilipi and Story Space, Britco, there are apps, wonderful apps that can help with that. So I suggest my students to go to these apps, or even publish their writings on social media, Facebook, or even create a blog using Blogspot or Blogger or WordPress or something, and post their writings. Because once you publish your writing, once you bring it out, this is what I believe. Once you bring it out, you have that psychological feeling that you have written something. You're a writer. That is the feeling that we need to inject into a writer who's starting off as a new writer.
So coming to publishing, sorry. So you said about publishing online and blogs and things. Coming to real publishing, which is your area of research, we have to talk a lot in this. The mainstream publishing and self-publishing, the major difference, and how you see that the mainstream publishing as monopolizing, commercializing. You can please give us more insights on those.
Yeah. One of the major areas of my research, the research that I couldn't formally complete, but I'm still interested in, an area that fascinated me was this, that publishing of making books, basically. I was focusing mostly on book publishing. And even though I was focusing on book publishing, the very process of publishing itself isn't limited to publishing books. It includes publishing anything, publishing any kind of information. And in today's world, it is also digital publishing. So there is a tendency to usually compartmentalize publishing as only printed publishing or book publishing or magazine publishing or newspaper publishing. It is not like that. Publishing in today's world, in 2021, as we look at it, it has both its digital and printing or printed counterparts. So publishing is business. It is also an art in that sense. However, more than that, more than a business, more than art, it has a controlling ability, and it controls the lives of almost every other human being. The way our educational system is arranged, the way we conduct our schools, colleges, and universities, the way our researches are arranged, everything is based on printing and other forms of publishing, especially print publishing. Print has a major importance in publishing. That is why most people associate publishing only with print publishing. Print publishing starting from 15th century, mid 15th century, from that primitive prototype created by Gutenberg. It evolved into a global institution. In present day, you have, in the case of books, you have probably 5 or 6 major publishers who are multinational publishers. Every other publisher that you come across, you hear about are only limited to one nationality or one locality. They cannot sell their own books in other territories without uh, the, uh, the proper help or channeling through these multinational publishing companies and their distribution agencies. In other words, if they say no, you can't release your book to a multitude of people. And what is the quality, what is the criteria that a writer has to go through in order to be published by any of these major publishing houses is also a very, very tricky question, because quality is nowhere to be seen. Quality is not at all the standard. Editing is not the standard. Nothing is the standard. Standard is what they create to be the standard. Standard, even the word standard has been created, manipulated by publishing houses across the world, especially corporate publishing houses. If an individual wants to publish his or her book, he or she has two ways, two methods. One is to go to any of these major publishers and wait for their approval. And I say approval in quote unquote. This approval depends on your fitting into their criteria of quality, their standards, their standardization process. If you don't fit in, they label you as inadequate or less qualified or a person, a writer with low standards. You'll have to live with it. Authors proudly project themselves having tons of rejection letters from these publishers hanging on their walls, breaking their wall nails. I don't think that is a narrative innocently created to entice their own egos. It is a narrative that is injected in them, that is being taught to them, these so-called mainstream authors, legendary authors, even including a writer like Stephen King, American author. These authors themselves believe that a publishing house is the sacrosanct authority of quality and standard. So definitely that is affecting the common man. So my attempt was to create an awareness among people that publishing presently is this totalitarian, authoritarian practice. You can break out from it by being an individual who publishes his or her books. You don't need to be a publisher to do that. All you need to do is to go to a printer, talk your terms. Definitely you can find a distributor. So using these two agencies, a printer and a distributor, you can distribute it yourself, or like Walt Whitman did, you can do it yourself. Like, for example, if you have a lot of friends, ask them to send their addresses to you and postal addresses, and you can mail them your book using any other postal service that your government runs, or that any courier service that a private firm runs. You can use your courier or postal service to send books. You can use the age-old money order system in India if you're a person from India, or you can use Google Pay or any other online payment platforms to transact with your customers. So in order to do that, you need to have a very good network. And in order to build your network, you need to have a lot of social media presence. So if you're a person with a social media presence, a lot of followers, a lot of friends on social media, if you can influence them in some way, then definitely you can also sell a lot of books. Even if you sell just one book or 10 books, doesn't really matter in my point of view, because by publishing yourself, by printing your books out yourself, by designing your own cover, by doing the page layout yourself, by doing everything after learning each and every process, it's a learning process. It's also a very satisfying process as well. It is like building a small piece of art by yourself. Books don't just become mass production in that case. Books become artifacts, every book independently, individually created. Every book has an individual identity, So in that sense, every book becomes a piece of art. So I was intending to create that awareness using my research, and I'm midway. Hopefully, I'll be able to do that in the future. There are lots of things that people need to know about publishing and about how the politics of publishing works. in many cases, in history, people books by themselves. There are legendary authors who have published their books by themselves. Like, for example, Walt Whitman, as I mentioned, William Blake, for example. In Kerala, Vaikam Muhammad Bashir, Sangampura Krishnapilla. In many other cultures, you can see similar examples. In Britain, I think Eliot had published a book by himself. So there are plenty of examples. And in today's world, there are certain things that you need to know in today's world in 2021. There are publishing houses that offer you self-publishing packages. I'm not talking about that. Even the term self-publishing has been commercialized, marketized, and probably monopolized. I think certainly it has been monopolized. So self-publishing itself has been monopolized. Nowadays, you can have self-publishing companies. Self-publishing itself is a term which means the author publishing himself. So you have a publishing company that helps you publish your books by yourself. That is a paradox, right? So you have that paradox in today's book. You have publishing companies that even Penguin has a self-publishing.
Yes, Penguin has a self-publishing platform. Yes.
Yeah, that is even Hay House Publishing has a branch. In Malayalam, you have a major publisher in Malayalam. I don't want to name that publisher. They have a self-publishing branch, who's not a multinational, but is a major publisher in Malayalam with ties across the world. All these major publishers having ties with all these people. So, basically all these publishers are, what they are trying to do is to monopolize, the very idea of self-publishing itself. Author publishing himself or herself. That is what...
Like, what these MNC brands do, they sell two brands under the same company so that they can tap into both the audiences. And as most of the authors have romanticized traditional publishing to the point where we won't even think beyond that. We will just stick to it. We will not want to even leave it on self-publishing through by ourselves. We will not even go into that self-publishing page of the a publisher which we know. I would like to end this segment of LOL with a last question, and we will go on to the next segment, which is called World of Ws. My last question to you would be, all of us, as writers, there are writers who say, when I'm asleep, I get like a line, and I start with that line to write. And there are some people who, the first thing that comes to their mind when they start writing is the heading. Okay, I am a person, the first thing that comes to my mind before I write is the last line of my chapter. Last line comes to my mind and I start writing. So what is that for you? Is that a single line, or is that a single idea, or what is the base for each short story or like each chapter of your novella or novel?
But John Irving say the same thing, like you said. He writes the last line first. In my case, it is usually a scene, a picture, an image they try to capture. That is what I get. And I have written about it in my book, Life After the Floods, a non-fiction book. Life After the Floods. It has an introduction where I have written how I get ideas. If you are a new writer, you will be able to benefit from that introduction. I've written my methods, about how I publish my books, about how I do these things in the prefaces, in the introductions of many of my books, so that readers can, or budding writers or aspiring authors can also benefit from it. My recent book, for example, Stories We Live, has an introduction that talks about a similar process of writing. I have published traditionally, and I have also self-published. As I said, my first book also was self-published. Being a writer, being a creative writer, and being a self-published author, when these two things merge, I believe this first picture that I get in my mind that I mentioned just now, the picture that I get, I am able to focus and polish this picture better. I was able to find out the appealing elements or the element that can appeal to my readers, because I'm a self-published author. That is what I have realized. So at least once for every writer, it is important to publish his or her books oneself. Why? Because you will get an idea about what it would be like to read your book like a publisher does. Because in that case, you are
Very interesting. Mm.
a publisher. So in that sense, this first image that I get sometimes about a book, about a story, I get to look at it from a different perspective also nowadays, because I'm also a publisher and an author. So I get to look at that from a publisher's perspective also. Will this work like a novel? Will this be long enough to make it a novel or a short story or a novella? Or will this be good as a work of poetry? Will this work in that? Or will it be a non-fiction? How can I better express this idea? The earlier stages I struggled with that, but nowadays I get that multiple perspectives because I have indulged in all these practices. I believe that has been very, 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 very helpful for me.
Mm.
Yeah.
Interesting. Very interesting.
I think now is the time for our next segment, which is World of W's. We have this segment on love of literature. This segment, we just pose you like 6 questions: what, where, when, how, why, all that. And it's almost like a rapid fire. It has to be on point. So we're just going to ask those questions so you can answer us, and let's see how it goes. I think Ms. Jayanthi can start with the first question.
Yeah, but we will have to log in again. Log out.
I think we'll have to log out and log in again.
Anu Lal, so this is a world of W's. Whoa. It's a wrap actually. We are wrapping the session with a few questions and a quick answers. You can repeat whatever. So, what do you think is the future of traditional publishing?
Right.
Bright.
Right. Yeah.
Traditional
you
publishing.
can go on and 2-3 lines will do. It's okay. You can go
It's
on.
okay. I mean,
no.
No. Bright. No. Because you are creating an awareness which is against the traditional publishing, and yet you say it is going to be bright. Is it going to be bright, Anu Lal? You mean it? Then what about the self-publishing? What is the future of self-publishing? Also bright.
It's not exactly. I cannot say that it's not definitive answer for self-publishing. For traditional publishing, it is bright, certainly. It is already brilliant, and it is going to be amazing for traditional publishing. But for self-publishing, it will be an organic growth, I'd say.
Which is good.
Good
for us all.
Organic growth. That is what I'm going to call it. It is going to be an organic growth. It's going to grow. It's not going to stop somewhere and become brilliant, But traditional publishing is already at a very strong hold. And the amazing thing about self-publishing that I'd like to add, even though the time is not that much,
sure, please.
I'd like to add that the amazing thing about it is that you are not if you are a person who doesn't want to be part of a corporate conglomerate, and you just want to express your ideas, creativity, everything, and you just want to share your soul, as some people call it, with your readers, without caring about the institutionalized structure, then you will enjoy self-publishing. If you enjoy the institutional structure, if you enjoy every other tinglet that comes with it, with the traditional publishing, with the glamour and all that, then you are going to love that. So basically, it is for a select few, but it's something that you have to be very, very careful about, because you need to keep it precious. You need to save it for the future generations. Self-publishing, you need to save it for future generations. You need to let the people know, the future generation know, that your creativity is not restricted to getting approved by a major corporate company. Your creativity is free. It's for you to express. Your expression is also not limited. You can print your own books. You can take it to market. It is your birthright. You are not limited, You're not limited to do this within a certain area or within a certain
Got it.
group of people. You are able to reach the entire world with it. And using digital technology that we have today, don't even ask about the possibilities. So it's a growth for self-publishing, an organic growth, I'd say, not for the self-publishing companies. They are also the so-called, they're already part of the traditional framework, the corporate world. Don't call them self-publishing companies. Like I have a problem with that. There are no self-publishing. There are only self-published authors. That is the difference.
Definitely. So our next question is, how can aspiring author get his book self-published? Like you said, not through the self-publishing platform, but what is the process? How can he go about self-publishing? Can you just jot down like a process chart or something for an author to do?
Yeah, the process of self-publishing begins with your word processor. You can have your own computer and laptop. If you don't have it, then you have to depend on other people. If you have a good phone, it can also help, but you need to have a laptop or a desktop in order to do that better. You can format your books using your Word format, Word software, Microsoft Word or any other word processor. You can also use any other page makers that is available and create your page layouts. Then you have to create a cover. If you are a good artist, good graphic designer, you can do it yourself, or you can also ask some artist to do that for you. You have to pay him for that. If you are a good editor, you can edit your book, or you have to pay another person to edit your book. You have to outsource all those things, but you can do it yourself if you are good enough for that. I'm not for authors doing their own editing. I always prefer professional involvement in that, because editing, like writing, is also a creative activity, and an editor can better do that than a writer who has written his own or her own work, because they'll have an objective point of view. Then you have to go and find a printer and get a deal. These days you have digital printers who can print your books on demand. So you can either print 1 copy or 10 copies or 100 copies depending on your demand. Usually copies would cost you around 40 to 50 rupees if they are 150 to 100 pages from a digital printer. So you can probably spend 45 into 100, 4,500 rupees and print 100 copies of your book. And you can sell it. If you have 100 friends in social media who want to read your book, you can sell it to them. You can send them the book via courier or via postal service. Then if you want to enroll your book on various online retailer sites like Amazon or Flipkart, you have to get an ISBN number. And it is Rajaram Mohan Roy Institute in India that gives you ISBN numbers, international book numbers, so standard book numbers, international standard book numbers. You have to get it from them. You have to write to them in order to get the ISBN. There is a process involved. You have to send your cover design image, your page numbers, etc., your synopsis, etc., and you have to wait for some time to get ISBN so that you can get a barcode.
You have to pay 500 rupees also.
You have to do that payment also. But it's a long process. So you have to wait for some time. But even without ISBN, you can sell it yourself. You can just mail it.
So why short stories and why a series?
Short stories are actually where my doorway to creative writing as a confident author, and series of short stories and series of longer stories. I have written a series, a fantasy series, which is in midway right now, which is published in Kindle by a traditional publisher. And I've written series of short stories also. And the series always gives me like a better expression of something higher. So I always want to achieve something higher with my writing, and series always helps me get that to my readers, a higher purpose, a higher goal for my writing. So series helps me that at least it gives the reader an assurance that I'm going to do something next. They'll have to wait for my writing. I'm not going to end this with this one book. I just want to create at least that awareness in my readers. That is the purpose of series.
Great. Who are your target audience? Like, who are you focusing on through your short stories and novellas and novels? Do you have like a specific niche of people?
I have worked a lot on that, because finding a niche audience is what usually writers take a lifetime to figure out. You have to be very aware about who your audiences are in order to make an impact among people. And my audiences are usually people who love literary fiction. That is the kind of stories that I write. So that is my niche, I believe. Literary audience, people who love to read literary fiction. Yeah.
It was great. It was great having you, Anu Lal. I wish this can go on and on, but podcast
we
has
have two more.
You,
No, there are
okay.
two more questions.
Okay.
Yeah.
What are the
I'll just shoot you those
Okay.
two questions. This is about your next book, which is the novel that you were talking about. When is it expected in the market? When are you going to publish it?
By the end of 2021 or 2022.
That's great. So where can we find your work? Where can our listeners find your work? And can you just tell us the list of your work and where we can find all of them?
My latest book is Stories Will Live. It's a collection of short stories, and all my works are available on Amazon. Most of them are listed in Amazon. Some of them are not, unfortunately, but you can find except two of them, Wall of Colors and Other Stories, and Prabhuddha the Clear-Sighted. Except those two. Every other book of mine is available on Amazon, also available on Kindle. So you can go to Kindle and purchase a copy of my books. My recent book is Stories Will Live. And you will love these stories. It's something that I love personally, something that I wanted my readers to read, something that I wanted to share with people who love stories and people who love to read stories to others. So it's something that I always cherished to bring out, and finally I was able to do that. So
it's very nice.
You can find it on Amazon and Flipkart or all those social shopping sites. Yeah.
Oh,
thank you so much.
Nice.
To our listeners, I would like to say Mr. Anu Lal has an anthology published called Better Than All Happy Ever Afters, and he has a novella which is called Mount Thurman, and there are a set of short stories like Wall of Colors and Other Stories, and he also has a book called You Should Know How I Feel. So as he says, most of his books are available on Amazon and Kindle. If our listeners are interested in reading his books, please go and search for him online. Thank you.
Thank you, Anu Lal, for being with us. I hope you enjoyed. Have a good night. Bye. Take care.
Thank you.